Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad. I'm sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. Got a nice little show for you today. We're going to get you caught up on the Klint Kubiak news, the offensive coordinator hire that the Seahawks made a couple days ago. We haven't had a recording since that decision was made, so we kind of wanted to share our thoughts on that. And then we were going to preview the Senior Bowl, the offensive side of the ball, looking at all the position groups on the offense. As the week progresses, the offense and defense at the Senior Bowl are practicing. Day one of practices was today, so we can go over a few of the players that kind of stood out in that, and then we'll get to the defense tomorrow. So we're just slightly behind, but not too bad. The game's played on Saturday, so we're definitely going to get you ready to watch that, which most people, I think, do as general fans are concerned. If you're a diehard guy like us and you love the off season and you're really interested in the draft, these sorts of things, the practices and all that kind of stuff are wonky little things that guys like us like to do. So we'll share what we know.
I'm the only thing I would disagree with. I don't think most fans watch Senior Bowl, because I just don't think they care that much. It's cool stuff. It's cool.
Yeah,
stuff
you're probably right.
But it's like, not watching the game doesn't mean they don't want to hear about guys the Seahawks may draft and like what the draft's strong in and that kind of stuff, and how it matches up with Seattle's needs. And there's some really interesting stuff going on at the Senior Bowl this year. And it's a really good draft in a couple of places. And we'll talk about more of that. But let's start with Kubiak, because this was the hire that you and I predicted when
I went back and looked at our show. This was, we had talked about this previous to the 15th. We actually recorded a show on the 15th of January and basically narrowed our discussion down to one candidate that we favored over all others at that time, and it was Klint Kubiak. And we stated the reasons why and all that kind of stuff. And here it is. That decision was made. And the process played out, but I thought it was clear to us, and the reasons why it was clear were the same reasons I think why Mike Macdonald and John Schneider made the decision to hire him. And it's basically the process and the scheme over the stats and the results that you may have seen for him. I know that there's a lot of consternation out there with fans pointing out, well, his offense finished here and finished there, and he, it's not very good and blah, 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 it's not creative and all that kind of stuff. I would say to those people, that's not really what the focus should be. In my opinion, it should be the process that he uses, the complementary football that Mike Macdonald identified as a reason, his primary search reason that he's looking for somebody, the teaching process, how we do it, why we do it, that sort of approach, and the tree that he comes from, the Gary Kubiak Shanahan tree. Kyle Shanahan's most recently part of that as well. And those offenses work in the NFL for certain reasons. Now, if you look at Klint Kubiak and why certain things were less successful or more successful or whatever, all the stats, everything you want to look at, that's fine. But you also have to weigh that against these circumstances for each of those situations. And being in the NFL and running offenses and being tied to stats is a very complicated thing with a lot of different moving parts. And he's just, I think this hire for me is the best hire out of the candidates available. I'm just going to say that. And it marries into the kind of team that Mike McDonald wants to run, which is really, honestly, a defensive focused team with a complementary offense that helps his defense become even better by
Mm-hmm.
managing the ball, not turning it over, scoring points. If you take a look at like Shane Waldron, for example, when he came from that Rams system, I look at this Klint Kubiak hire as a more established and seasoned opportunity to do what Shane Waldron was brought in to do, but never succeeded in doing. And that he was able to run that McVay system, the Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, kind of marry those two things together as a hybrid and bring those things in where
Mm-hmm.
the run game and the pass game are coordinated together. When you looked at Ryan Grubb, nothing ever really was in sync. He never did any one thing really well. It was all kind of disjointed. One time they ran the ball somewhat effectively, and you'd go 3 games and um, you'd have a guy like Ken Walker have 4 or 5 carries. And you're just not going to see that out of a Kubiak offense. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to have him as a coach. I think it's the safe hire. And I mentioned that earlier, I think in that first show, it was like, this would be the safe hire. You want guys like John Schneider and Mike McDonald, they like to be employed. This is kind of one of those hires that you would make if you want to keep your job. He's got a high ceiling or a semi high ceiling or high floor and a
Mm-hmm.
mediocre to just slightly above average ceiling for me. But he's never going to be like the number one offense in the NFL. He's never going to have these like massively explosive plays, but it's going to be efficient. They're
Well,
going to take their shots. Everything's kind of disguised a little bit. They run a lot of play action under center type stuff schematically. It's just an offense that's proven to be effective and work in the NFL. And he also marries that up to the personnel that we have. And I think he makes the offensive lines look better and operate more efficiently and so forth. So I like it.
I think you're underselling the potential. Um, Let me ask you a question. Who would you rather have? Um, like, which roster would you rather have besides quarterback? Seattle's offensive roster or the Saints' offensive roster?
Seattle for sure.
Yeah.
And the offensive
Um,
and improvements on the offensive line would make that choice even more stark. Like
yeah,
Seattle
but
here,
but you don't even
you know,
you but even without the improvements of the offensive line, you'd rather have Seattle's offensive personnel over the Saints. Um,
Saints
Seattle
have a couple pieces, and that was it. They, Kamara and a couple wide receivers, and that was the extent of their
and Kamara's
talent
old.
pool.
So when Waldron had a quarterback, um, that offense was a top 10 offense with fairly poor personnel overall. They points per drive is how I'm doing this, and I got these numbers from field goals, and I went back and checked them. But um, when Derek Carr was out there as the starter, they averaged about 2.4 points per drive. Seattle averaged 1.9 when Geno was playing, and 1.89 when he wasn't. So whatever. Um, but in terms of points per drive, they were significantly better. The Saints were than Seattle with weaker personnel.
Yeah. So, what is your opinion on? And we can just go back and forth. What's your opinion? What's your opinion on how similar this offense would be to Shane Waldron's, say, first year here,
Oh, I don't.
when that was
Well,
true, when
okay.
what you just said was true?
Um,
I mean, you use Shane Walders as an example. Is that because you
No, I
believe
didn't use,
that
I
they
wasn't
come
using
from the
Shane Wall.
same?
I was using Seahawks this year, 2024 versus the
Oh,
Saints
okay.
this year, 2024, when um, Kubiak was calling plays and running the offense. Kubiak's offense was better than Seattle's with weaker personnel.
Yeah.
Now,
But
when you look at
still,
it, and everybody go, "Oh,
they finished middling because, that their first couple games were. But I don't want to. This is for
they
me,
finished middling
and
because they had Spencer freaking Rattler under center for most of the season. They had a
tons of
guy that,
injuries, all sorts of other places, and that's why you can't
yeah,
look at
but
stats. You can't
you
look at
can't
stats and end
win.
results. And
You're not going to win with Spencer Rattler.
I get that.
Like they
Yeah,
ran him out there because they knew.
you're arguing to the choir here. I get that.
No, I know. I'm just saying they ran him out there because they knew he would lose games for them and they would get better draft picks. Um, but when they
Well, I
had
mean, Carr
Carr,
was hurt.
yeah, but they had. I mean, when they had Carr in there, they were a top
Mhm.
10 offense with fairly weak personnel. So the idea that, oh, he's, going to be middling at best as an offensive coordinator, I think does not give him any credit for what he did. He had a really good offense despite crummy overall personnel when Derek Carr was out there.
Yeah, it's
And
hard. Now, what you're saying is projection, and I get that because he hasn't yet been able to do that effectively over the course of an entire season for any place he's been. Like Minnesota was the closest thing you could say, and it was still somewhat, middling there, number 15 overall, that sort of thing. Kirk Cousins played well under him. Justin Jefferson had 1,500 yards, et cetera. I mean, there were some standout things going on. So I agree with you that the potential is there. It
there were
just
lots of
hasn't all come
problems,
together for
and
him, given a lot of situations and a lot of circumstances.
there were a lot of problems in Minnesota. Um, he took
Yes,
over after his dad retired.
yes,
And
yes,
there were a lot of problems, a lot of roster problems. And then Zimmer and the whole coaching staff got fired because Zimmer was
exactly.
kind of in over his
Right.
head.
And it
And
wasn't anything
so,
because Klint Kubiak did anything wrong. It was just the circumstances that he found himself in.
yeah, so this is what I mean. Like, um, he's done the job and he's done it pretty well. And I want to push back on he'll be, his floor is high, but his ceiling isn't that. It's fairly low. We don't have any idea what his ceiling is because he's never had talent. He's never had great talent. In Minnesota, he had Kirk Cousins and Jefferson, but no running game, and honestly, no offensive line. And with the Saints, he had. Um, sorry, I hate their roster. They had Carr. That was it. Um,
Yeah.
I just I'm not a fan of their roster at all. And yet without decent talent, they were significantly better than Seattle was this last year.
Yeah. And I yes, and I prefer the offensive scheme for sure. Now, Brian Grubb, some people argue he should have had another opportunity, et cetera. It
Why?
just wasn't going to work
Why?
in the NFL. I don't think
I
because
mean, if you're a
his
Washington
run
Husky
game was
fan,
just non-existent.
if you were a Washington Husky fan and you're like, because you were a fan of his coming out, I can see you thinking that, but there's nothing from the games that suggested he deserved another day.
Agreed. In fact, they were thinking about firing him after the bye in week 10. So, okay. So, as
They
far as
should have.
the scheme is concerned, the scheme is going to look like somewhat like Shane Waldron's scheme, basically. You're going to run a lot of play action. You're going to run a lot of, um, that play action is going to come off of the run game, based on the run game. So that play action is going to look like it's a run play. as opposed to forecasting what you're going to do, like Ryan Grubb did.
Mm-hmm.
And I like those opportunities. We'll take a look at receiver usage and so forth. There's going to be some more opportunities to go deep, I think, in this scheme. I think that you're going to see a lot more 12 and 13 personnel with 2 and 3 tight ends. I think the tight end usage is going to go way up. We probably need to have a conversation about Noah Fant, because we need a guy like Noah Fant. I just don't know if we want to do the cap number that Noah Fant's coming in at, but we can have that conversation. I think Barner has an opportunity here, really big opportunity to have a big sophomore season. Running backs out of the backfield. I think Alvin Kamara, even though he was injured quite a bit, had like 80 receptions out of the backfield.
Yeah.
And that's kind of historically been a thing in his offenses. And so Ken Walker has a huge opportunity to really have
and so does
breakout
Charbonnet.
season.
Well, Ken Walker's got more of the skill set of Kamara. Charbonnet is the better at picking up a blitz if they have to make that switch. He might even have sure hands coming out of the backfield. It doesn't matter that he's not quite as explosive. He's going to be a part of that offense. And I wouldn't put it past the Seahawks for Charbonnet to end up having the better year of the two of them next year. I think he fits a lot of what they want to do, especially because when you start looking at the running game and what they do, there's a lot more quarterback under center, a lot more outside zone, and coming off of that. I mean, go watch San Francisco and you get kind of an idea. Or if you want to go back and watch his dad, the games when his dad was coaching, it'll be a lot like that. And what you end up with that is, it's just a different style of runner. You kind of glide down the line until you get the seal block you need, and then it's one cut and go. And honestly, Charbonnet can do that. He's a guy that's going to be able to, when there's a hole, pound his way up through it. And if a linebacker tries to step in there, he's still going to fall forward for yards. Walker's desire to bounce things and whatever may create some home run shots, but I don't know if that one cut and go is a mindset that he will instinctively go to, because he's not been that kind of back in the past. So
I agree honestly, to a certain extent with what you're saying. I am curious as to see if he can adapt a little bit. I think that suits him, his skill set, as far as the speed and the breakaway stuff and the gliding outside before you one cut and go. I think he could do that if his decisiveness was, improved slightly. We'll see. I would think that a guy like Kubiak may favor that skill set initially. Like in camp, I think that Ken Walker may have the leg up as far as being looked at as favorable in this scheme until it's proved otherwise.
Yeah.
But yes, certainly Charbonnet deserves opportunities. There's no question. Even Kenny McIntosh in this. Kenny McIntosh is kind of a one and go guy as well.
He's absolutely a one cut and go. He's a guy that could really explode in the new offensive scheme. I wrote an article about the outside zone back in my writing days and detailed out, frame by frame, what you're looking for, what the running back's looking at and all of that. And it was interesting because they were running outside zone to the right. And when Marshawn cut back and did that, he actually ran outside of the right tackle. Or sorry, they were going to the right. It was outside the left tackle. So even though it was outside zone to the right, he ended up, because of the way the zone blocking works, he ended up left of the tackle, but significantly right of where the right tackle started up. The whole line had shifted down the line. Right. The whole line had shifted down as they wash guys out, and all you need is one seal block to stop that. And the guys in front of you are getting pushed forward, and the guy behind and at one point they get sealed and they stop moving, and a gap opens up. And as long as the running back can read it and explode through it, the runs are there, and they're consistently there. And after the garbage that we saw from the design of the running game this last year, I'm excited to get back to a competent running system.
I am too.
So
So there's a couple of key things for me to talk about today, because we're going to have a lot to talk about over time and personnel and how it fits and all that kind of stuff. We're getting into that season anyway, so this is a good time to have those conversations. But currently on the roster, you got Charles Cross, who was kind of built for a zone scheme to begin with anyway, become a better gap blocker in time, but he's got the skill set to do the wide zone. Abe Lucas has shown that he has the athletic ability to do that sort of thing. Lumea is another athletic guy, a guy that we had a horrible rookie season in. Christian Haynes is a better fit for this.
Yes, he is a very good fit for this system. But where was he this year? The whole him not getting on the field thing, just, I don't even know if I want to.
Well, they wanted to. I think he was miscast. He was kind of misdrafted, I think. And if you look at all of our offensive linemen, there's a disjointedness there, and this is not one of Schneider's strong suits, I don't think, in aligning all of the linemen into a cohesive unit. I don't think is a strong suit. I think he gets a bunch of pieces and then, makes the coaches try to figure out how to use them all. But I like him. I think a guy like Oluwatimi may have a better opportunity to be successful in this. He's a little, undersized, a little bit more athletic, not so power focused. He's not pushing guys.
He definitely fits the profile of an outside zone game more so than anything the Seahawks have run since probably 2013. 2014.
Yeah, so I'm excited about the offensive line again. It's kind of crazy, but one little change. Now it'll depend obviously on who we hire as the offensive line coach, which was the key kind of appointment here in the next week or so. We'll have to definitely watch for that. But there's some opportunities even in free agency. Atlanta center Drew Dahlman, if Oluwatimi is not going to be it, a guy like that in free agency makes a lot of sense. Ideal fit. James Daniels from Pittsburgh, Mika Becton, Will Fries. There's the guys in the draft, Wyatt Millum, Armand Membu. These guys are at the Senior Bowl. Jack Nelson, Gray Zabel, all of those guys would be great system fits, I think, and guys at the Senior Bowl that you want to keep an eye on. But I'm excited because it's, I really kind of want to see the cohesiveness happen on the offensive line. We just haven't seen for a long time. And I would just be interested in your thoughts about the offensive line and how you can be successful in this game versus what we were trying to do with Grubb and Huff.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to last year, what they were basically saying is each guy beat the guy in front of you, and they failed repeatedly. Whereas the outside zone running game scheme, the what they're bringing in is it's schemed to create spots, not just required that somebody goes and beats the guy in front of them. It's very much like how, with wide receivers, I think most fans would understand this better. So some wide receivers can get open at will, guys like Justin Jefferson, and they can just get open. It doesn't matter because they're just quicker than the guys guarding them. But other guys, they can do that sometimes, but they're at their best when they're schemed open, when the offensive coordinator is doing things that confuses the cornerbacks or gets to them where they have to run through guys or that kind of stuff. You can scheme guys open. It's similar in the running game with offensive linemen. You can either ask your guys to beat the guy in front of them every time, or you can scheme holes. And too often last year, they didn't beat the guy in front of them. They got beat by the guy in front of them over and over and over and over again because the interior of the offensive line was so poor. And there was no effort made to scheme running lanes. If guys didn't win in their block, the running play was, dead in the water. So, and that's really kind of that's what I'm looking forward to. The offense last year was so hard to watch. And I know that it was effective at times, and Gino had some good stats, even though he had too many interceptions. He still had some good stats, and I get all of that. But from just a continuity, just knowing how to call a game and set defenses up, and just the lack of play action and just the poor design of running plays, especially like on the goal line or third and short. They're just so poorly designed. It was so hard to watch as a guy that knows football, and I'm just looking forward to anything that's better than that. And that I
well, it was certainly the most.
That.
It was certainly the most disjointed, non-cohesive offensive coaching performance I've seen in a long time, really, and that's why he's not back now. Yeah. Mike Macdonald, I wanted you to answer this question. Mike Macdonald has come out and stated and reiterated that his identity, he wants the identity of the offense to be cohesive with the defense and be physical and dictate terms and all that kind of stuff. Now, New Orleans last year in 2024 ran a zone blocking plays 64.1% of the time. And that's the wide zone. That's where the offense moves laterally on the snap, trying to get to the outside shoulder of their designated defenders, stretch the defense horizontally and allow the running back to choose his hole, basically. And now, how does that scheme marry up to dictating terms and being the physical team that Mike Macdonald envisions?
I don't think it has. It's like the key is that they run the ball, they run it effectively, and they are able to convert regularly on third and short by running the ball. They're able to get 4 yards on first down and not get behind the sticks. That that you can set up, at the end of games. Like I look back to when Marshawn was at his best in the Pete Carroll years, was at the end of games when the Seahawks had the lead, and they could just feed Marshawn and let him just punish the defense and grind out those yards. And it didn't matter that they had 8 or 9 guys in the box. Marshawn was going to run somebody over and get that first down. That was a physical running game. That's what Mike Macdonald wants, is the ability.
Is there a certain style of running back that's missing on the roster then?
I don't think so. I think, but you've got 3 different running backs that give you 3 different skill sets. And honestly, I kind of like all of them for different things. And I mean, as far as like the passing game stuff, they all have their own talents in that too, not just in the running game. I think that they can use these guys in different ways. I like the running back room compared to the scheme. I think that's a good fit. It's a matter of, can you get the offensive linemen and get them doing their job well enough to get this running game going. I don't know.
Now, the other thing that's important too is tight end blocking and wide receiver blocking out on those edges.
That's never been a problem in Seattle.
So
I mean, that basically Jake Bobo just became more valuable.
Right. I agree.
Despite the fact that he didn't have a good year.
A little bit.
Yeah, he didn't have a good year as a receiver, but he's so he does all the little things, blocking downfield, running those pick plays, doing things where he can occupy a safety because he runs right at him. He's okay being that guy that isn't going to get the ball very often, and making other people look good. And there's a lot more value to him when you're going to bring in this offense, because his ability to block and uh, drive people back, make sure that safeties have no chance at getting to the wide receiver. There's a lot of value in there that he didn't have in this last offense because he wasn't a guy that got open without help. He was one of those guys that you need to scheme open. And since he didn't get open without help, he got very few catches and didn't have a lot of value. But in this new offense, he can contribute to the success of the offense in so many different ways.
All right. So we're about 30 minutes into this thing, and we haven't talked about the Senior Bowl yet. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I noticed.
Do you want to go ahead and do the offense here?
Yeah, I got time.
Yeah, let's run through some offensive stuff. So Senior Bowl is, for those that aren't paying attention, are mostly seniors and some underclassmen as well, some juniors. The best of the best are invited to the Senior Bowl. You have a number of people that don't show up or whatever, but about 120 prospects out of the Senior Bowl. You're going to have about 115 of them get drafted in the NFL draft, and there's about 260 players overall drafted in the NFL. So this is a big game. This is a big deal, and it's not just the game. The biggest part of the Senior Bowl is actually the practices and the measurements and the one-on-one drills that they have, where wide receiver against corner in practice. You've got your offensive lineman against your defensive lineman. It's just fun to watch if you're kind of into that sort of thing. It's fun to watch, and it's very revealing because you have players coming in from all sorts of different schools, different competition, some in the SEC, some in the Big Ten, some for smaller schools. Those guys are trying to prove that they can be on the same field as those big school guys, and so there's all sorts of dynamics going on. And draft slots are literally being determined, out of this Senior Bowl. And so it's just a fun event, and they do a really good job at it.
Yeah, the Seahawks scout the Senior Bowl heavy, and a lot of their draft picks the last few years have come from guys at the Senior Bowl. And so it's worth, guys like us that get into the scouting thing, is worth getting into the Senior Bowl stuff because, that's what the Seahawks are going after. Now, other teams don't draft, Senior Bowl players as often as like Seattle does. And so for those fans, I could see them being like, yeah, whatever. But Seattle tends to lean on this process this week in order to, make some evaluations on the guys that are there, and
they get to talk to them, and
they get to do interviews or just talk to them, in a non-formal way. The thing is, like, the game, it's the Senior Bowl, and everything leads up to the game and all of that. The scouts and general managers and people that are there this week, most leave after Friday's practice. They don't stick around for the game. That's how much the game matters.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. They just don't care. Because they've got all the information they need. And so that is, I don't know. That's just one of those things that I when I first found that out, I thought that was weird. And then the more I got into scouting and figuring out how it works, I was like, yeah, really. I mean, the information is all there in the practices. You want to know someone's footwork, and you want to know where they put their hands. I'm talking offensive line because that's what I do. Whether they get over their toes too far, and how's their balance, how wide's their stance, like how quick are their feet. I can determine
does the film that you've accumulated over the year or 2 years in college, does it match up with what you're seeing in person on the field? during
Yeah,
practice? What's the work
that's
ethic? How are these
yeah.
guys around, the other
Mhm.
guys? Are they humble? Are they, all that kind of stuff?
And so much of offensive line play is, um, you know, you are an individual with individual talents and whatnot, but they have to work as a unit. There's got to be five guys working in unison. Um, and so when you get to the game, it might look like a guy like gave up a sack, but the truth is he was blocking one guy and thought that the guy beside him was supposed to pick up a different guy, and nobody blocked him, and he gets blamed for it. It's communication and the scheme, and the fact that they've worked together for 1 week, and that's it. It isn't as simple as that. But as far as the evaluation, like I don't need that because of all the other variables, all the mitigating circumstances around every play in the game. I don't have that in the practice. I can evaluate the individual skills and the individual talents just watching them play in those one-on-one drills. I get so much out of that as a guy
Yes.
that studies offensive linemen, and that is where the value is, and the fact that the GMs and scouts agree because they also go there for that and then disappear for the game. They don't even watch the game. They don't care. The game is more just for fun and for the fans. It's not about the scouting process.
Okay, let's talk about players.
Let's do that.
Let's start with quarterbacks and get this out of the way, and then we can turn our attention to maybe some offensive linemen right after the quarterback group. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So the big name at the quarterback spot in this game is Jalen Milroe, the Alabama prospect, 6'1", 225, has 4.3 speed. But we found out measurables came out on a lot of these guys where we can be talking about that today. He has 8 and 6/8 inch hands, which is very, 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 very small. This is like who's the prospect that got drafted by Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, and then was sent away, traded.
Yeah,
I can't remember. He played for Pittsburgh.
Played for the University of Pittsburgh too.
Yeah. But he had small hands as well, and he hasn't really done anything in the NFL so far. So that pauses for me, like his evaluation. It's like I'm not so sure. Plus, he's really known for more of his athletic traits and running and the pocket presence and decision making and going through reads. All that kind of stuff is going to be what scouts are going to be looking at the Senior Bowl.
He needs to show that he can do those things. And honestly, so far, it's not all over his tape. What's all over his tape is that this guy is insanely athletic. He looks on running plays like Lamar Jackson looks on running plays.
He looks like a running back.
What he lacks is Lamar Jackson's passing ability. And I get Jackson wasn't the greatest passer when he came into the league, and he's developed over time. But are you willing?
You've got to have that base level, to begin with.
Does he have the base level arm talent that you can build on? And are you going to be patient enough to let that arm talent develop and turn into something good, the way it did with Lamar? So I don't know. The small hands give me pause.
So I don't have these in any particular order. So some guys nobody's ever heard of. I'm going to mention Tyler Show, Louisville, 6'5", 225 pounds, ideal size for a quarterback, but 5-year part-time playing prospect, turns 26 years old this year, pocket passer, 4.72 speed. He's going to be a priority free agent. He's probably not going to get drafted. Seth Hennigan, Memphis, 6'3", 215. Very small hands again, prolific high school career, 5A state champion in Texas, which is a big deal. But the footwork and the mechanics are the big concerns at the Senior Bowl, and we're going to see what he does there. One of the prospects that I want to talk about that nobody seems to really be talking about, and I get it because it's Notre Dame quarterback, and they're very limited there on what they do offensively, and it seems like nobody really gives anybody any credit. But I really like the athletic profile that Riley Leonard has from Notre Dame. 6'4", 216, runs a 4.5, 240, moves around in the pocket really nice. Ball placement and arm strength is very consistent. Football IQ, going through his reads, all those things are there. And you're just going to have to kind of figure out, since his, the stats aren't there, like the opportunities to throw, to lead the team, to play out in different situations are just limited with the prospect out of Notre Dame. But a guy like that, and like if he was available in the third round, I would not hate it if Seattle were to take a flyer on a guy like Riley.
I would agree with that. Because he's a guy that his ceiling is, Kirk Cousins was a 4th round pick, and everyone thought that his ceiling wasn't high enough. But his floor was pretty high. And so they took, Washington took him, and they ended up being better than RG3. And that was the thing. And that's kind of the same idea here. This is a guy that's floor is reasonably high. And people
but
are
you don't
like,
know how high the ceiling is. You just don't know.
You have no idea. Athletically, it looks great, but show me something on the field. If he was that good, wouldn't the offense have opened up and they would have used his talents?
Yeah.
Right.
But you can
that's
see
the
on
thought process.
film when you watch him, like there's something there. Like there's things there that you can work with. There's, he has. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there is another Notre Dame quarterback that we had this, not we, you and I, because I didn't know you then. But the same exact discussion was had when the Seahawks held the number 2 overall pick in the 92 or the 93 draft after the 92 season.
Yeah.
And it didn't turn out well.
It's true.
I mean, it really comes down to it was, I started that statement going, God, the name will come to me. I just got to play this along, and it just hasn't.
I know. I can see him. I can literally see him.
Yeah.
The name is completely empty for me.
Oh, God damn. That's going to piss me off.
That's okay. You look it up, and I'm going to talk about Jackson Dart. So here's the other quarterback now, Will Howard from Ohio State. He's another player that maybe could come on. You could make an argument that he's going to be undervalued and his draft stock might rise, but he's elected not to play at the Senior Bowl.
Rick Mirer,
yes.
Rick Mirer, Mirer, Meyer. Yeah. That was an ugly draft pick in the end.
So let's talk about Jackson Dart. So Ole Miss, I think there's going to be some conversations about this player after the week in Mobile. Highly recruited, coming out of high school. You look at him and he's toolsy. He's thrown 54 touchdowns the last couple seasons. Outstanding against Duke in his last game, 404 yards, 4 touchdowns. When I look at him, I see a player that you could develop. Maybe some say he's not ready for prime time, but Lane Kiffin, worked with him there at Ole Miss. He's currently got a mid-second round grade. I don't believe he's going to stay there. I think this is a player that ends up moving up into the first round. And that's why I think it's a consideration for the Seahawks at 18 or a slight move back, to say 24 or something like that. And pick up an additional pick and have your quarterback prospect there. What do you think of Jackson Dart, Keith?
I actually like Jackson. I think he's a guy that's toolsy, and coming out of that offense, he needs to learn how to read a field, and not be, a one-read quarterback. And so there is some concern, and that's why he's not going to be in the top of the draft.
He does progress though, Keith. I watched him against Georgia from 2024, and that's a big game. And Georgia's a really good defense, and they got a tremendous defensive front, and they put a lot of pressure on Ole Miss's offensive line. And Jackson, I was impressed, I have to say, and they won that game, Ole Miss. I was impressed with the way that he handled the pressure, with subtly moving around in the pocket. he went through his reads, sometimes 3 or 4 reads to get to a receiver that was open. Didn't always make that throw, but he made the right decisions, and he didn't turn the ball over, and they ended up winning that game. And I just found that to be a really big game for me on his assessment, because it was Georgia, and it's one of the best defenses in
I
college
haven't watched
football.
that.
And
I haven't watched that game yet.
yeah,
I haven't scouted that game, and so
I'm telling you, I
that's
was
some of the tape
impressed.
that
I just was like,
I'll
wow.
get to. And so yeah, I mean, and what I saw in other games was a lot of, um, well, it's a Kiffin offense, right? It's a lot of predetermined reads and that kind of stuff. It wasn't a
Yeah,
5-step drop, read the field, know what you're doing pre-snap because of what you see instead of what you look over the sidelines and see. It's a Kiffin offense, and so I think that reputation of Kiffin is going to hurt him. Um, and because that's what you see in a lot of the tape. Now, like I said, I haven't watched the Georgia game, and you're right. One team that beat Georgia this year, and probably stopped a potential three-peat. But yeah, I mean, you got to look at I got to look at that, and I got to see. I just think that as a guy, I don't see him going, top 5, top 6, but I also don't see him going in the third round. He's gonna probably go um, in the teens, maybe the 20s is where I'm thinking right now.
I
And I
agree.
know,
Right now,
but
Keith,
that's
I have him as my third highest rated quarterback in this draft.
interesting. I mean, I don't, but that doesn't mean anything at this point because I'm not. I've got a lot of scouting left to do. Um,
I do too.
but I when I say that he's going to go in the teens, that is already with the fact that quarterbacks are way overdrafted built in. Meaning, if I just go straight pure talent and not allow for the position variability, I've got him probably mid second round. But I guess it's an incomplete evaluation, so whatever. Let's move on.
I tell you what, if he's there at 50 and the Seahawks are on the clock,
Oh, you take him.
and looking at the other prospects available in the draft at in that range,
Yeah, you just
he
take
could
him.
be in play.
Yeah, absolutely. He won't be there at 50. That's insane to me.
Not
Um,
after the Senior Bowl, not after the
mm-mm,
combine,
no.
not after you compare him, eye test to all the other prospects. He's going to be a
Yeah.
riser.
He's
Okay.
going
Dylan
yeah,
Gabriel.
he's gonna move up.
Go. Yeah.
As I say,
Dylan Gabriel,
he's
Oregon. Sorry,
what's
Keith.
your take on him? Because
My take is that I
I
think that he's probably going to be a 5th round pick.
okay.
And people think that he's going to be a guy that could move up and so forth. I don't think so. This is a guy that's 5'10", 200 pounds, just lacks the physical measurables that you want out of a quarterback. His arm strength is okay. I watched him in person. I'll say this, against Arizona State this year. And it was a good game, but Oregon really got the best of them. That was early in the season, I think
Mm-hmm.
right at the end of September, and Arizona State vastly improved after that game. But Dylan Gabriel looked good. He did. He looked good in that game. He processed well. He had some long throws that were complete in that game, and I came away impressed. But at the same time, I think he's got too many limitations.
So
And
can I give you my comp
you
for
watched
him?
him in, well, one second. You watched him in
Okay.
practice today. I watched him a little bit, and he struggled taking snaps from under center. And really only took shotgun snaps in college. So that's something to monitor. I think he's a backup. He's a solid backup quarterback in the NFL. I don't see him as being a starter.
Seneca Wallace.
Really?
That's who he is. He's
I
Seneca
don't know
Wallace.
that he has Seneca Wallace's athletic ability to run.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the Oregon games I saw and what they had him do and all of that. That's what I came away with watching him. Is he's too short, has to move in the pocket in order to just find guys because he's got to create throwing lanes, but has nice touchdown field. But
The
he's got a
biggest
lot
play
of
Seneca
limitations.
Wallace ever had didn't come at the quarterback position either.
I know. Came at wide receiver.
It's crazy. Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely some limitations there, and I think he's draftable for sure. The kid wins. I mean, there's no question. You go look at his resume and look at all the games that he's played. Most games started at quarterback in college football history. Close to the most wins I think ever as a starting quarterback in college. He's a very competent game manager, and so you can do something with that. Now can you build that into a starting caliber guy in the NFL? I don't know. I think he would have to take a few steps. I don't know that he's got that Brock Purdy processing and arm talent and decision making. And so you'd have to really elevate all those things in order for Dylan Gabriel to be a competent starter in the NFL. But I don't
What do you
think
think of?
he could. I don't.
I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say, what do you think of Will Howard? Because this is a name that I think is going to be up and down. And he's there at the Senior Bowl too.
I I see Will Howard being below like Jackson Dart for sure. And I see Will Howard being a fringy back of the second, mid third round prospect for me. Just because you go look at Ohio State, Keith, it's Ohio State. Like that
Mm-hmm.
roster is built and and he still was kind of okay in that. He never really had to lead them to, take over games and so forth. So a limited player, but you know, he's a winner. The guy's
He's got a
the
lot to
guy was
prove this year.
started it at Ohio State for goodness sake, right? So I mean, you've got to be a certain level of player to do that, and I think he's okay. But is he a starter? Can he develop into more? I'm not sure. I'd have to go watch more film on him to be honest, to give you a really honest assessment. I have not done that yet.
The other guy that's there at the quarterback position is Tyler Shaw from Louisville, and if I'm being completely honest, I know nothing about him.
Yeah.
So
Well, he's
this,
6'5", 225, 5-year starter, 5-year part-time, not starter, 5-year part-time player.
mm-hmm.
Never a starter outright. Like played 4 games here, 3 games, played, I think his most games he played in one season was 6. Turns 26 years old this year. Pocket
Oh, he's
passer.
okay.
Can't really
I did
move
not
around very
realize,
much.
did
I
not
think
realize
he's
he was
going to
that
end up
old.
being an undrafted guy.
Yeah.
In
He's,
fact,
like I said,
I'm
he's
not
just the
sure
other
why
guy there.
he's at the Senior Bowl. I think he's probably the one guy I just have really no interest in watching just because of the age, the 26-year-old thing. I don't know that he's got a place in the NFL. I think he's probably going to end up being an XFL guy or something like that.
So, okay,
The other
if
guy
we
that's
move on,
interesting is
oh, never mind.
Taylor Gersma out of Laurel or Laurelier in Canada. 6'6", 212 pounds, played in 39 games, completing 72% of his passes for 10,230 yards and 76 touchdowns and 26 interceptions. Now,
Never heard
with
of
all
him.
that said, that's an interesting looking prospect. He's from Canada. They invited him to the Senior Bowl, which is a great honor for him. But this is like a level 3 quarterback comp, as far as competition level that he's playing at. So
Yeah.
think William and Mary, stuff like that. He's
He
he's kind of at
isn't
that level.
even he isn't even on the consensus big board at NFL mock draft database. He does not
that
even
goes 400
exist.
players deep. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So somebody's got a good agent. got him there.
actually, yes, somebody's got a really good agent, or there's an NFL team who saw those numbers and was like, "Hey, we'd like
I
you to
want to see
invite
it.
him," and there was a
That's
spot,
true.
so they did. And maybe he comes and they go, "Yeah, never mind," but he was at least interesting enough that somebody wanted to see him.
So position group, I'm ready to go on tight ends. We wanted to talk about linemen. Let's go through the linemen because that's going to be a longer little process here, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't
the
think that
the
we
thing
need
about the
to.
offensive
I don't think we need to go through and spend as much time on the linemen
individual.
as we did as on the
Well,
quarterbacks as individuals.
let's just talk in general then about specific position groups that the Seahawks are going to be interested in at during the draft process, and what type of lineman you think would fit.
I don't think that they're going to be
So
going after the monster size, 340-pound guards and stuff um, that they've liked under Cable and have kind of, liked a little bit here and there. Just they don't have them. They don't tend the. I'm talking about the Anthony Bradfords. They don't have the mobility
yes,
to do well in an outside zone scheme. And so I think we're going to be more looking for guys that are, I want to say undersized because that's not right either, but they need the length. But you want them to have a certain amount of lateral agility, a certain amount of athleticism, not just being huge. And that is, but I also don't want to say because originally with an outside zone, if you go back to when this first started, um, Alex Gibbs didn't want anyone over 300 pounds. Um, he wanted his offensive linemen in the 295 range. So guys would come in at 310 and he would have them get in
it's
shape
funny.
better and lose weight because he
Yeah,
wanted guys that could really move. And it worked. That was also, the 90s. Um,
you Alex Gibb. Now, didn't he coach for um, Gary Kubiak?
yeah. So
He was the offensive
Mike
lineman there
Shanahan was
at
the head
Denver.
coach. Gary Kubiak was the offensive coordinator, and Alex Gibbs was the offensive line
Yeah,
coach for all of
yeah.
those Denver Bronco
Wow.
teams that were just,
So
it didn't matter who you stuck back there. It was an instant, 1,000-yard rusher and like all of that. Like
yes,
that's the brain trust behind what is the now known as like the zone blocking, but specifically the outside zone. Um,
and that's where
and so
Davis, the running back there, really excelled. Um,
yeah. Terrell Davis until his
you
injuries.
mentioned the specs of their favorite offensive lineman. Things have changed just a little bit, I
Things
think,
have. Hmm.
because the athleticism I think is greatly improved in the last 20 years, and so you're
Hmm.
able to get bigger guys that can do more. And we have a few guys on our offensive line that are going to be big. Now, Anthony Bradford probably doesn't have a spot anymore.
No,
I don't think.
Anthony
I think
Bradford,
his type of playing
his
style
spot.
just
Yeah.
does not fit. So that'll be
Tomlinson as well.
interesting. Yeah,
People that are
Tomlinson's
saying,
gone,
"Oh,
I
they should
think.
re-sign Tomlinson." No, he has no
No,
business
no,
being on a team in
no.
this scheme. The Senior Bowl is got a lot of guys that I like.
I do too.
Unfortunately, a lot of them are at tackle. So the Six don't really need a tackle. Um,
They do have some
but
guys that kind of can slide inside. I mean, Jalen Rivers out of Miami had a great practice today, stand out against powerful rushers
mhm.
on the inside today. He's really fluid on his lower half, can play both tackle and guard, but he's probably going to slide in based on his arm length. And, he's got the IQ, smart guy to do all the stunts and twists and all that kind of stuff. So that's a guy for me that I was looking at. There's a couple of guys that really grade out on Pro Football Focus um, really well, and I want to talk about those guys. Let me find them really quick. Okay, so
Well, while you're
Armand
looking,
Membu,
I was gonna say,
Missouri.
watch Gray Zabel, out of North Dakota
Yes,
State.
yes, I want him.
Um, yeah,
Dominant run
everybody
blocker,
wants
but a
him.
small school guy. But he graded
Yep.
out at an 84.8 as a zone blocker at North Dakota State. Now,
Mhm.
that's why the Senior Bowl is really important for a player like Gray, because he needs to find out if he can compete at the highest level against players from, big schools. And I think he will. I think he's going to be able to do that. Allowed 7 quarterback pressures and 1 sack in pass pro all year. Had a great. So here's a note I took from a journalist at the Senior Bowl today. North Dakota State offensive lineman Gray Zabel was a jaw dropper following a great practice. He was poised, patient, and powerful in one-on-one drills and handled defensive linemen from Power 4 schools with ease. A small schooler, we wanted to see how well he held up physically, and there was no drop off. Zabel excelled at guard and center today. He's a round 2 player. So that's what
Yeah,
you want to hear
that
if you're interested in that player.
yeah, he is my early in the process like obsession. And he's there in mobile. And
I hope he's there at
I
50 because I don't think they would take him at 18. But
no, but if they move back a couple times and are picking at 29, they might.
yes. The other
And we'll
the
see
other
it.
prospect that I really like along with him is Wyatt Millum from West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
6'3.5", 315 pounds, 32 5/8 arms. So he's played tackle in college. He's gonna move inside from based on the length. And he was the Pro Football Focus's highest grade run blocking lineman in both gap and zone schemes, both. So he does both really well. And also very good in pass protection, allowed 6 pressures and 0 sacks in 2024. He's one of my obsessions, if you will, early in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there anybody else offensive lineman wise you want to, that you want
Um,
to talk about?
like I said, there's a lot of tackles. And guys that I don't think the Seattle Seahawks will be in the market for. But if he falls far enough, Carson Vincent out of Alabama A&M, if people are like, huh, or for that
Yeah,
as a school name, but it's an HBCU, and this guy is massive. He's 6'6" with long arms.
almost
Um,
6'7".
yeah, and
35 and an eighth inch arms with an
yeah,
83 and 6 inch wingspan.
yeah, this guy's massive. He's really long, and honestly, from what I've seen from practice, his feet are better than I ever would have thought. This guy has a chance to become very good. Now, it's going to be um, he's going to have to, continue to show well all week, go to the combine and really excel there too. And so his name, he could start rising really fast. Right now, I think he's going to be 3rd or 4th round. Um, and if he's there in the 3rd round, like that becomes, I mean, that basically you're looking at Abe Lucas, right? A guy that is going to take
Yep.
a little bit of work, but has so much upside and talent, and you just can't say no. So, but yeah, so like I said, and then there's some great tackles. Josh Conley out of Oregon. I think that a guy like we mentioned Zabel, he's kind of my obsession. I like another small school guy, Clay Webb. He's an interior lineman out of Jacksonville State. Um, and he was a guy that was recruited to Georgia, went there, um, didn't want to sit and wait, um, for his turn for 2 or 3 years because that roster was so stacked. So he transferred and went to Jacksonville State and um, he just looked like a guy that didn't belong at something that small. And we'll see how it works this week. He didn't really show, like, he didn't stand out the way other guys did in the first practice, but at the same time, it's not like he got beat. and looked bad. So he's a guy that I find very interesting, and I want to keep an eye on. Um, and then, going to not a small school for the first time, Jared Wilson, he was Georgia's center. Um, and
He could be the first true center taken off the board.
Yeah. And I was really looking forward to seeing him there. Like, this was one of the guys that I'm like, all right, I get a chance to get a good look at him. And then he left. He withdrew from the Senior Bowl to go focus on combine stuff, and I was really
I did not
disappointed by
know
that.
that. Yeah.
And so that
Okay,
was
so
frustrating.
let's talk about the couple other position groups here. Running backs. This is a great year to need a running back. This class is stacked and loaded through the fifth round easy, and you could probably pick up a value in the 6th and 7th round as well. I guarantee Seattle's going to take a running back because this group is so good. And Mike McDonald, I think the emphasis is so keen this year on developing that identity. I really have a feeling like they're going to take a guy that's oversized to pound the ball. That I think that we are missing, like a guy that's like 300 or not 300, 225 to 235 pounds. Or a guy like Cameron Scottaboo out of Arizona State. Now everyone likes Cameron. He's a big deal. You watched him in the playoffs and you're kind of enthralled with the guy. I watched him in person. He's a monster. Really. I love that style. But he's going to get beaten up in the NFL. So you got to kind of weigh that out. He's got a lot of wear and tear on his body, and the way that he plays, he's going to be physically worn out, I think, in 3 years or less. You have to, depending on his usage.
Yeah.
But a guy like RJ Harvey, Central Florida, 4.41 speed is a guy to watch. Devin Neal from Kansas, one cut and go stretch zone guy, if there ever was one on tape.
Yes.
It surprised me if he's a guy that they look at maybe in the 3rd round if he's available. Damian Martinez at Miami, 6 foot, 232. There's a big guy I was talking about, age 21, runs a 4.55 40, physical guy, also able to cut and go for you. Needs a little bit of a on ramp to kind of get there, but similar to Charbonnet in that respect. Khalil Mullins, 6'2", 235. Also, very, very fast, out of Michigan. I really like him. He runs a 4.45 at 6'2", 4.45. Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State, another guy, 6'2", 225, fast, both gap and zone speed, combo, really wears down defenses in the second half. A guy like that. Who else?
We just went through so many so quickly. You mentioned Ollie Gordon,
Sorry.
Devin Neal, Harvey.
I will say that one of the speedsters on this list is Bashal Tootin out of Virginia Tech, 5'11", 209, runs a 4.32 40, which is probably going to lead the running back group out of in the combine this year. Speedster. If you want a guy that's just really, that'd be interesting. How about tight ends?
There's a bunch of interesting running backs that aren't at the Senior Bowl too. So we'll end up probably spending some time on that position when it's time.
I agree with that. That's why it's so loaded. I mean, there's probably 20 draftable guys, and usually in a draft you're going to end up with about 12. And so I think this is going to be a big draft. And if Seattle picks up additional draft picks by moving back, maybe they pick up one.
You mentioned tight end. Can I just, there's a bunch of names. We can talk about all of them if you want, but honestly, there's one guy I want.
Okay.
And I'm sure it's Elijah Arroyo. Out of Miami. This guy had himself a day in practice and just outshined everybody else. Not highly thought of going into the Senior Bowl. He was a guy that's, people are looking at like 4th round or whatever. But just watching him um, go through the drills and dominate other people and just always being open in the passing drills, I'm just like, sign me up. He looked smoother and better than guys that are viewed way above him. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, he's definitely a patch catching guy, but he's got the physicality. You add the
Mm-hmm.
physicality to it, the guy that can maneuver, use his body to high point the ball. And I really like him. I really like him a lot. The other guy, well, there's one of the best run blocking tight ends is Bartholomew out of Pittsburgh. Terrence Ferguson is an interesting guy, a pass catching kind of guy. Mason Taylor from LSU is LSU's all-time leader in receptions, 129 in yards, 1,308 overall. So this note came out of the Senior Bowl today. LSU tight end Mason Taylor made several wow plays today, snatching the ball cleanly when it was errant and showcasing really good route running ability. He has a rising round 2 grade. And of
That
course,
doesn't surprise me at all.
there's, the highest rated tight end in the draft is Tyler Warren.
Who's not there?
If you watch, and if you is not at the Senior Bowl, but if you watch Tyler Warren, my goodness, I would love to have him in the Seahawk uniform. He's going to go in the top 15. But if he were to fall, that'd be a hard one to pass on. It
would be
one of those players that you just really love to see.
Fannin.
I like him.
Green.
No, he's an interesting pass catching prospect. I need to watch film on him specifically. I've only seen notes so far.
It's hard to
but
find
he's a very interesting guy.
Bowling Green is my problem.
It is.
I have
but he's got like a 2nd round grade.
Yeah.
So he's going to go, but he's, the interesting thing is, if you move on from Fant for whatever reason, you can't do his cap number and we can't negotiate with him and we just need to cut him and move on. We're going to be looking either in free agency or in the draft for a pass catching guy that can complement what we currently have on the roster, which isn't a lot, and so if you take a look at our tight end room, it's basically empty. I mean, you've got AJ Barner, the end. Tyler Mabry's out there, and with the futures deal. Brady Russell is mostly just a special teams guy. Farrell Brown's not coming back. If you got rid of Fant, your room is empty. So you'd have to kind of figure that out. And so a guy like Harold Fanning would be an interesting guy because you're going to want a receiving tight end on the roster, not just, you might have a few two-way guys, the guys that can play inline and outside, similar to what we currently have with AJ Barner. But I think you definitely want something a little bit more dynamic if you could have a choice. Wide receivers. Right. This is a wide receiver draft as well. Last year was kind of a down year. This year it's kind of back to normal. Lots of different prospects, lots of different body types. It's Arian Smith out of Georgia. I really like if you can fix the drops, but he's a blazer. I think he ran a 10:18.18, 10 or 100 meter run in college, world class speed. So that would be interesting if you're looking for speed. And Seattle, I think may. So you're going to replace Tyler Lockett on the roster, right? So you're looking at a 3rd wide receiver. Now you can either have a possession style guy, more, physical, kind of a Jake Bobo body style with maybe a little bit more speed, or you can go with a blazer guy that can really stretch the field and help DK Metcalf a little bit, take some pressure off him, or be a kind of hedge on DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf's probably going to have extension talks swirling around in a few months, and if they don't do anything, maybe DK's not happy, maybe they trade him. Either way, he could be playing on the last year of a deal, and you kind of want something on the roster to replace that. So,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of guys. I mean, Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, physical guy. I really like him. Restrepo out of Miami, going to be a guy that's going to go, back into the first round, maybe second round. Tez Johnson for me is too small, 5'9", 156. He weighed at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy that was productive in college, right? Just a very productive guy. But my goodness, that's going to be tough for him. I mean, if he can get up to 175, I could see it, but
yeah, that's still going to be hard. That's tiny. Guys like that size, they just take a beating in the NFL. The hits are just too common and too hard. They don't tend to last. Although then you look at what is it, Drayden, the guy the Seahawks brought in as their kick returner for the end of the year when they finally got fed up with the other guys, and
right, he was 177,
size.
right? I think he was 176. I don't think he was 156, but 170.
No, but he, I mean, he got his weight up to 177. He was that small in college. Like he was in like the high 150s, if I remember right, and then put on a bunch of weight, and didn't just like eat his way to put on the weight. Like he lifted and put on a bunch of muscle. Still never became a productive receiver, but has carved out a career as a return guy. So yeah, definitely interesting there.
So a couple of names that look good in practice today. Jack Betch from TCU. Note here, TCU wide receiver Jack Betch had maybe the play of the day with a climb the ladder reception over the top of a defensive back, routinely catching our group's eyes with strong hands. Another one was Utah State wide receiver Jalen Royals. Natural pass catcher with soft hands, thick lower frame, allows him to run through traffic. Grade 2 grade. Just a couple names to look at and watch.
Beck is an interesting one to me because he was a tight end initially and then transitioned to wide receiver. So he's really good at beating zone coverage and stuff, but doesn't have great speed. And I look at that and I go, well, how does that compare to Jake Bobo? Well, he's probably faster than Bobo, and but he's not as tall. I just wonder, like, he seems like a guy that may drop and be just a really productive, mid-round pick that probably should have gone sooner, but just didn't have the measurables that people love.
Yeah, interesting. A.O. Maynor out of Stanford is another probably headliner name that's at the Senior Bowl. He can solidify himself. West Coast schools, seems like players are always a little diminished based on where they come from versus the talent level that they may possess. So that'll be interesting to see if he can kind of establish himself there. What else? Ty Felton, Maryland, kind of a twitchy player.
Very twitchy.
Jalen Noel,
seems more like a gadget
Iowa
player
State.
to me.
Felton?
So.
Yes. Yeah. He's got the size and speed, though. I think he can be, he can be a number 2 wide receiver, I think, in the NFL. Pat Bryant, Illinois, 6'3", big talent outside, fast. Darian Smith, I think I've already said that. Yeah. Chamari Dyke, Florida, twitchy guy, play inside and outside. There's some guys. Savion Williams. Yeah, we'll get in more. We'll get into the position groups because we're going to do position group shows where we specifically focus on just one group of players. So we'll get into these a little bit more in detail. But it's, that's kind of the offensive side of the Senior Bowl. And we've got the entire defensive side to do. as well in a separate show. And the defense is fun. Like the defensive line is a nice group. I like the corners this year. Um, there's some nice linebackers, although we're probably not in the market for a starting caliber linebacker, depending on what happens with Ernest Jones. But there's a lot of depth in this draft. I really like the draft overall for depth. Last year was a little weak after round 5. I think this goes a little further this year as far as the depth.
Yeah, I think it goes significantly farther as far as depth. So, I'm actually like, this is a good draft to have a lot of picks in the middle rounds. And I could see the Seahawks deciding to move back a couple times off 18 in order to get some extra players, because there's going to be some worthwhile players in there.
So have you done any mock drafts yet?
I have done a couple, but I, didn't go into them super seriously with, trying to research players and that kind of stuff. I was more just going from memory, and I haven't done enough scouting to really do that.
As painful as it is, I try to research all my picks, because it really helps this process early in the process. So I've done probably 30 mocks in the last 3 weeks, but and that kind of helps, put the values together and so forth. But it's fun, but I can see the Seahawks moving off of 18. When you get down right around 18, at least in the mocks that I'm doing, quite a few of the premier guys are off the board, and non-value position group guys are available, and some interior offensive line guys are available later on, around the top of round 2, and like Jackson Dart, for example, could be available as well later in round 1. And so moving off of 18 to pick up an additional 3rd round pick, for an example, is kind of an enticing move, especially if you could pick up like a 3rd and a 5th to go from 18 to 27, something like that. And I found, I found that 27, 28, 25, somewhere in there is a good spot to be at, especially if you can pick up that additional pick, which comes in handy in the middle rounds. And we'll talk about all of that draft strategy and stuff, but there's reasons that you want to have a couple 2 or 3 3rd round picks in this draft, because that's where you're going to get, I think, your value picks, and definitely guys that have the potential to start, but initially are going to be really nice roster fillers, and guys that can be rotation type players. Now you may even end up with a starter, depending on position group. You're going to have some safeties available. You're going to have some running backs, maybe a tight end, interior offensive lineman in that area of the draft that you could end up getting a starter. But we'll see. Anything else today?
No, we are way over time. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up.
All right. So next show will be the defensive side, and we'll try to get to that here tomorrow, I think, hopefully. So find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, like it, and share it. Leave a comment, all that good stuff. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.